By the sign of the Holy Cross, from all our enemies, deliver us, O Lord our God. Mary, I consecrate to your immaculate heart all my being, for the glory of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. A warm welcome to everyone here watching Pebbles of the Lord. My name is Ira. Today's episode is about when evil is worked against you by evil entities or evil human beings, your consent is absolutely necessary. And I want to discuss a little bit about how they get your consent when you don't even think that you've given it. Most of you out there know that for the last 5 years, something spiritual has been happening against you that feels evil. You've noticed that many of your friends and family members have completely changed their view, their feelings about things, such as things that are immoral are now becoming something that people are accepting. They're acclimating to them. Criminality, war, pedophilia, human trafficking. The criminals now have become the protected class. And you're all wondering why that is. How can normal, moral, religious people now accept many of the things that 5 years ago would be out of the question? And the answer to that is the evil that's being worked against you is not just on the physical and intellectual planes of existence. For example, physically, you may say that they're mandating you, controlling you, forcing you to accept these things. Intellectually or mentally, you could say they're programming you. We hear both of these excuses. But on the spiritual level, the most powerful level of influence, there are groups of people, call them our evil overlords, and groups of spiritual entities, fallen angels, demons, that are working magical spells, bewitchments, enchantments, magical operations against you. And this is not beyond the pale for many of you that do not endorse that concept. This is not beyond the pale that they would organize this as well when the entire playing field is so complex that things that are being worked against us on the 3 levels, the 3 planes of existence. It doesn't matter if you believe it works, if you believe it, they believe it. For many of us, we understand it's a supernatural world. We have experienced it ourselves. Reality is both physical and metaphysical. There is an entire spiritual world, an unseen world filled with entities and consciousness and forces, which are autonomous as well. And these things all obey the laws of God. There are spiritual laws written into the universe, wired into the universe, just as we have physical laws wired into the universe, such as gravity and thermodynamics. 3 of the most important spiritual laws that have to do with why do our evil overlords need our consent before they work magic against us are the 3 laws briefly discussed in episode 1. Love, free will, and justice. They are a divine triangle, a golden triangle. And they are the most important laws written, wired into our universe. At the top of the pyramid is love. Love is God. Love is also a generative force within the universe. And because God is love, He wants to be loved in return and wants to give love in return. Unconditional, real love. In order to have unconditional and real love, one must have free will to choose it. So on the lower leg of the triangle, free will rests, and love rests upon free will. Without free will, we would not have the ability to choose love or choose God. Love rests upon free will. And if we have free will, we need a fail-safe, a check, to keep it in balance, which is justice. When you violate the free will or commit an act of evil against another, justice, the third spiritual law, will act. These laws, just like our physical laws, are indifferent. We didn't write them. We can't change them. They simply act. So when you violate the free will of another and justice kicks in, you choose to punish yourself. Now, justice may not come for you today. It may not come for you tomorrow or next century, but it will come for you. Our evil overlords are very legalistic spiritually. They understand the laws and the forces, and they know how to work around them, to look for loopholes, to be able to postpone justice. Magicka is an exhausting endeavor. Rituals must be worked upon rituals. Exchanges are made. Forces are harnessed. There's double tapping. It is extremely complex. Magicka is a system, and within it are many operations. And you wonder why these things would be performed against you and how they play out. First of all, it is the desire of our evil overlords for power and control over all of us. We are seen as a harvest, much like farm animals. Our energy is necessary to work the high-level magic that's needed to control the entire world. So you need an enormous population to be harnessed. And what I mean by that is, in order to work evil, you need to create fear and chaos. When you create fear and chaos, you render your targets incoherent, meaning when you're incoherent, you're not balanced, you're not focused, you're unable to discern, you're in a state of flight and fight. And when this occurs, you're easily influenced because this has opened your deep subconscious for fertilization. When magic is performed against you, it's performed on 3 levels, the 3 planes of existence. You will see physical acts performed, which are called rituals and ceremonies upon the world stage. They are obscured or hidden in ways that you don't know what they are. You may think it's simply a celebration, an opening ceremony, a dedication to an important governmental building, or a dedication to a tunnel, or the opening of the Olympic Games. And these things are out of context for the actual dedication or ceremony itself. On the intellectual and mental level, programming occurs. In ancient times, there was a group of very high-functioning sorcerers in a place called Medea. They were called the Medes, and they would be commissioned by kings and rulers to influence and control the population. When they were hired to do this, the kings and rulers would pay very high prices. But we get the term media from these people, the Medes, this cult. And today, our media still appears to be doing the same function. In the spiritual world, concepts, ideas, patterns all repeat. That's why you hear the term same playbook all the time. It's a natural occurrence within the entire universe. Even God himself, when he created the universe, repeated patterns. When the magic is being worked against you, there is a very specific language that's used. It is a universal language made up of universal archetypes, meaning symbols and sigils that our subconscious all understand. Your conscious waking mind may not understand it when you see an image or a symbol, but your subconscious understands it. Concerning your consent before magic can be worked against you, so our evil overlords do not suffer the consequences of justice for violating your free will. These images and symbols will be used against you within what's called the divine language. It's also called the Adamic language. It was the first language, God's language. It consisted of throwing images into one another telepathically, of symbols and signs. For example, everyone knows what the color white means: purity, snow. Everyone knows what the color red means: sacrifice. Everyone knows what an eagle in the sky means: strength. When we see these images, our subconscious understands them. In the original divine language, also known as the language of the birds to our alchemists of ancient times, the forbidden language, the green language, the Adamic language. Also, telepathy is involved. So images are thrown between two entities, two angels, two human beings, a human being to an angel or to an animal. The images that are thrown come with an emotion. And this is how communication was done before verbal language. When this is used against us, we'll see these images used in high-level advertising, marketing. You're being spelled. A strange attractor is put on the product, the person, or the idea. And because it's working on 3 spiritual levels against you, it's very effective. So in the media, we also see the flashing colors, repeating messages, precise tones used, the beating of that drum, repeating messages used. And that's affecting you intellectually and mentally. We use flashing colors to put ourselves as a cultist. I'm an ex-occultist now, a Roman Catholic. But we used flashing colors and images, symbols, and sigils in order to put ourselves in an altered state of which we connected and communed closely with the gods and goddesses, which are actually fallen angels and demons, the princes. These things are being used against you blatantly, but because you don't understand what's happening behind the curtain and you don't have the history of perhaps attending a mystery school for many years, you don't know how things are done, and you're an innocent. Your free will is being violated. Justice will come for the people perpetrating these things against you. Therefore, they need your consent. And they get it by speaking only to your deep subconscious. And what do they want? What are they doing? What are some examples? Well, these symbols and sigils can also be living symbols. For example, you can see a celebrity making the 666 sign over their left eye. That isn't an okay sign. It's over their left eye, and it is the 666. The three fingers make the image of the symbol of base consciousness and the beast, the dragon himself. These celebrities may or may not know what that symbol means, but they are simply props used within a ritual. It has a meaning. It hits your subconscious. You may not consciously know what it means. Another symbol is the shush symbol. This is a symbol or sign of Harpocrates, which, yes, it does mean silence and confidentiality. But what it also signals to someone who knows is a ritual is about to be worked against you. Are you okay with it or not? Because when we use the shush symbol, we've charged a circle with our fingers pointed. We release energy, the forces, and then we pull our finger back up to our lips within the circle. And the reason is to stop the forces that we've just projected into the circle, or the entities we've invoked into the circle, from rolling back onto or into us. When I see that symbol, I think, oh, someone has charged a circle, has opened it, and is about to begin a ritual or an invocation of something that will assist in a ritual. We also know many other symbols that are speaking to us. When someone is covering their left eye, they're seeing right. When they're covering their right eye, they're seeing left. There are two hemispheres to the brain. The right side is the instinctual, the creative, the intuitive, and the left side is purely intellectual. The left side is the path of darkness, when you see only intellectually and without spirit or holiness or grace. That's scientism. That's also Luciferianism. So when these rituals are worked against us and the strange attractor is put on an image or an object, we saw it during and before the pandemic. Everyone wondered why masks were so supernaturally needed and important to so many people. It was almost like people would fight for their life to wear a mask. I think normally people wouldn't care so much who was doing what, but people were programmed, bewitched, and spelled by everything we've just discussed to wear those masks. And you will still see people outside riding a bicycle in the great open nature because they are terrified not to wear the mask. And if you ask them, why are you wearing this mask at the beach with no people around you? They'll say, I don't know. I just feel I need to wear it. Or I'm afraid. Again, fear and chaos was used across the entire globe as the mask rollout was happening and as the pandemic was happening. What we now know is the illness created by the lab-created pandemic, which is a data point. It was intentional. That illness was not even 3/4 as deadly as they said. Yes, people died that were compromised, that were ill. And it was a terrible atrocity committed against you. But it was not what we were told it was. And what we were told was, when we watched the evening programming, the news, the media, what used to be the stock market box was repeating a continuous message with a numerological ticking tape, with a death count going up and up and up. And so as you viewed that, Whether you were thinking about it or not, you were being told every day, every second, you are going to die. You are going to die unless you do what we say. That grooming happened, but it began with the mask. You were told by the image of the mask, subconsciously, I will not speak out against what's coming next. Then the double tap happened, and the pandemic happened, and the beating drum beat was, you're going to die unless you do what we say. And it was seeded into your deep subconscious. So everyone did what they said without asking questions. It was unnatural. It didn't make sense. And many of us would often wonder, why are people doing what they say? As little by little, the truth, which cannot be hidden and is not subjective, it is objective, came out. But the end game was the vaccination. That was the concluding act that the first two taps were creating a foundation for. When it was time to receive vaccinations, you were already primed and groomed to unquestionably, no questions, no. Your consent had been given, it had been primed into you, and you would take them without question, over and over and over. The objective truth to this now is the data is in, the vaccinations probably took more lives than the illness itself. Now, this is just one example of how Magicka can be worked against you. But the result of it is you're very easily influenced now with division, what you accept and what you don't accept. When you're told to accept immoral things, it's much easier to follow the rules. So this first grand enchantment, bewitchment, ritual of 5 years ago was the catalyst that primed you for the future. Now, when you know these things have happened or are happening against you, you can rewire your brain or not even be affected by future things worked against you simply by knowing about it. Also, as Christians, we are protected, we belong to God, and not many of us were programmed. Yes, many of us were, but many of us were not. There is also 25% of humanity which will not be able to be hypnotized no matter what's done to them. Many of these people are Christians, yes, and there is a metaphysical protection if you're in a state of grace and accessing and using the prayers, asking Christ to protect you. As Catholics, we involve Mary, Archangel Michael, and all the other holy angels, as well as Jesus Christ. But just simply knowing that there are those at the shadowy top working these rituals against you when you're buying products, the strange attractor is put on the products you buy. Just like we bless our food, you can curse a product or food. Anything is possible that you can think of. And our evil overlords, at this level of technology that we have in these times, can do things that are far more effective than in the past. They can connect with many others, and the others may not even know what they're working certain rituals for either. So the rituals have been worked against you by people who are psychopathic. If you want to understand a demon, study a psychopath. And if you want to understand a psychopath, study a demon. They both lack something that's very important called empathy. So if you want to understand who is doing this against you, I'll tell you a story Once upon a time, what these people learned was learned within the great mystery schools. And the mystery schools had many, many disciplines. And the adepts, most of them, they had to be, were polymaths. They were experts in many, many disciplines and genres. In order to gain entry into these mystery schools, 2 tests were performed. And the first test was a question. How do you know when someone is suffering? And the potential neophytes would answer the question with, I know someone's suffering because I can see their body is in pain. I know someone is suffering because they're complaining, they're telling us they're in pain. Or I know someone is suffering for reason XYZ on the physical level. The real answer that you gained entry into these schools was, I know someone is suffering because I'm suffering. Empathy, compassion was necessary to gain entry into these, the most coveted schools and education on planet Earth. Today, our evil overlords most likely met each other and learned on the internet. At the highest functioning levels, yes, they only met in person as we did in the old days. But they are not tested before they're given the information is the most important point. But that first test question of the ancient mystery schools, there was an even more important test, which was the first initiation. When the neophytes were first initiated, they would be taken into a temple, an Egyptian temple, Kemet, and they would be shown a deep, dark pool. And in this deep, dark pool, they were able to see 30-foot crocodiles, shadowy forms, swimming in the deep, dark pool. The adepts and imperators would tell them, if you want to initiate into the next level, you must dive into this pool. But first you must sit by it for 3 days, 72 hours. So for 3 days, they contemplated their death. And then when it came time, many stepped away and declined the most coveted initiation on planet Earth, within the most coveted school, of which 10 years of education could have already taken place before this initiation did. The ones who did dive in were told they would see a light at the bottom of the pool and to follow it, and they would pass the test. But no one really knew if that was a metaphor. Was that an inner light they would see, or was it a true light? And what about those crocodiles? But the ones who dove in knew something. They felt something, and they did it. At the bottom of the pool, they saw a light, of which they followed, which led them up and outside of the temple to the rising sun, ad orientem, something in Catholic Mass we used to do. The direction of east is resurrection, new life, rebirth. To face west is the direction of death, the ancestors. When they came up facing the east, they had initiated, they had passed the test. What they didn't know was they were far too valuable to be risked with these crocodiles. The adepts had fed the crocodiles well and perhaps drugged them. So these crocodiles were never going to hurt the initiates. The other test was to place the initiate or the neophyte into a stone sarcophagus. We see with the Great Pyramid, there's an empty stone sarcophagus and wonder what it's for. Within this stone sarcophagus, The initiate was most likely given Blue Lotus and told they would have an out-of-body or death experience, of which they would return after communing with the gods. Places like this, pyramids, were understood, because they were built upon places of power, to be places you would commune with the gods. But no one told these initiates that they would be in the stone sarcophagus for 3 days. Just like in the previous initiation, they had to contemplate their death for 3 days, 72 hours. So when they weren't released within a few hours of the stone sarcophagus, they believed they were going to die. So in both tests, one believes they will die for 72 hours. What we now know scientifically is when someone contemplates their death for 72 hours, they never have fear of death again. So back to our evil overlords today, which never were tested for their empathy, their morals, their mental health, their holiness, of which they don't have. They were never tested. But in ancient times, the people who received the level of knowledge that we're discussing and alluding to, when they received this power of how to harness the forces within the universe and to understand God's laws, methodologies, they were people that could not be hired by these kings and rulers or commissioned to hurt humanity or to commit evil acts against humanity. They were people of empathy and compassion that could not be frightened or blackmailed or bribed by penalty of death to hurt others. They deserved the knowledge they had. Today, it is the opposite. Many of the people who rise to the second and third levels, after 33-degree masonry, there's a whole nother 2 levels. It is the same with all the orders. At that shadowy top, you have to have a very important trait. You have to be a psychopath or have the tendency. Therefore, you can be used, bribed, blackmailed to commit acts of great atrocities. Most importantly, you are most likely a Luciferian who rejects God. So no harm, no foul. They have no problem doing this to us, and they can. So our consent is necessary, or they will never escape the justice that will come after them for the evil they've committed. They must gain our consent. And the only way we consent to things that are evil against us is to not consciously know we're not saying no. Within the occult, we understand the Hermetic principles, and one of the best examples of free will and justice from the divine triangle of the 3 is the 5th Hermetic principle. It reads, the pendulum swing manifests in everything. The measure of the swing to the right is the measure of the swing to the left. Rhythm compensates. Well, what that means is when you swing the pendulum out to hurt another person on any plane of existence, whether it's Magicka or just you're going to beat them up, when you swing that pendulum out metaphorically to commit the act, you must know that it is a law that pendulum will swing right back with the same exact force and hit you in the face. It's a law wired into the universe, the 5th Hermetic principle. Therefore, when the Magicka is being worked against you, the operators have to take great care to do the workarounds, to utilize the loopholes, and to postpone what's going to come for them. In the end, justice will always come for them. But that's what's being worked against you. And as long as you know it, it will not affect you to the level it could. When we're in a state of fear and chaos, as I mentioned earlier, that's what happens. We can't discern. We can't pay attention. But we must. And we also must help each other by informing each other and paying attention and noticing and sharing what we notice with each other. Because when you shine a light by speaking about these things as much as you can, pretty soon the entire world will know, and they'll be able to see as well. It's much like the 100th monkey effect, where there were monkeys on 2 different islands, and when so many monkeys reached a level of all peeling their potatoes the same way, suddenly the other island began to do so too. We live in a metaphysical and physical universe, and we are very much able to understand each other without speaking a word sometimes. So by example and by your actions, we must all help each other and share what we know. So I hope you enjoyed today's talk. I hope there was something of value in it to you. Please remember to like and subscribe. And I will see you next week, next Wednesday, same time, same place. All right. Have a good afternoon. God bless you.